Welcome to a podcast that we haven't named yet. I'm Steve.
And my name is David.
And today we are going to talk about albums because we want to do a podcast and that seemed easy.
It is something that we can talk out of our ass about.
Yes. So today we are going to look at some albums by a band called Black Sabbath. David, how familiar are you with Black Sabbath?
I am mainly familiar with their first 5 or so records, about through, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Then I kind of fall off.
Now, they are coming out with a box set in a few weeks called Anno Domini. I think it's called. It's one of the songs that's on their TYR album, and it's going to have 4 albums that they put on the IRS label. And I happen to own 2 of those on vinyl. I actually purchased all these back before anybody cared about them. So, because I think the prices are all jacked up on eBay now.
The IRS label. So, what year was this?
We're going to talk about Headless Cross today, and that one came out in '88, I think it was.
Oh yeah, that was REM's label at that time. That's really interesting. Yeah,
I didn't know that. Oh, 1989. Yeah, 1989. Yeah, and it's got that really cool logo. But so yeah, today I'd like to talk about TYR, and I think I'm gonna do that for a later episode. But for now, we're gonna stick with Headless Cross. And here, Dave, analyze the artwork.
All right, so it is a big gravestone that's I think that's a Celtic cross, moon in the background, misty field covered with rocks. Yeah, this looks like a heavy metal album, kind of like the atmospheric, spooky, gothic kind of metal, not like the disemboweled people or like the hair metal type thing either. It's very specific type of gloomy metal, which the kind of thing that Black Sabbath would fall under. That I could see this album on the classic albums really easily.
Well, you analyzed it perfectly because this is more in the heavy gothic rock kind of vein. I know you mentioned you were more familiar with the Ozzy era, but you're probably also pretty familiar with the Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules era.
Oh yeah, I know it, just not as well as the Ozzy era.
So this is going to be a bit more like that, but it's going to have more of the spooky gothic influence that was more the Ozzy era. So I think you can kind of expect this to be a bit of a hybrid. So
and then the back of the album, it's the head got knocked off of the tombstone, so I guess Headless Cross. In the font that all the song names is in is a kind of gothic script, the kind you would see on a reprinting of the cover of a gothic horror novel, one of the classic ones like Dracula or Carmilla, that type of thing.
I'm pretty sure you can actually find that font in the computer these days.
All right, yeah, that's
all right. So we're gonna put this on, and then we decided as a gimmick we're gonna stop for side 1 and then talk about it, and then put on side 2. So
if we sold our souls, this is where a commercial break would go.
Oh, and we're back, and that was side A. David, what did you think of side A?
I liked it so far. I liked the keyboard player. I'd never really thought of keys in a Sabbath album, except for the bits where Ozzy's playing synth on Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, which is awesome and amateurish. But this was really cool, polished, interesting key parts, especially in that intro. That intro song, what was that called? Gates of Hell?
The Gates of Hell, yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was really cool. All the use of the weird synth sound, spooky atmospheric synth sounds and tape distortion. And yeah, that was just really cool. Yeah, I liked it.
The interesting thing about the keyboard player is he joined, I think, on the Heaven and Hell album, either on the album or the tour. No, I think he was on the album. And he actually stayed with Sabbath up through their reunion in the 90s. And I think he ended up exiting the band after the reunion, but he was actually with Sabbath for a very long time and actually played with pretty much everybody, like probably almost as long as anybody besides Iommi.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and he's a great keyboard player. And actually, he was initially hired to play bass on Heaven and Hell, and then they got Geezer back, and then they just kept him on keyboards. Now, my impressions of this album is I think it. You haven't heard the. I played you Born Again a few weeks ago, and that one is a bit more of a proper Sabbath album. But the two in between that were Seven Star, the one where Iommi looks all coked up, and Eternal Idol, the one I showed you the cover where the people on the cover almost died because they painted them. Those two albums I think sound a lot more commercial and what I would consider like more of an Iommi solo album, especially in the case of Seven Star. And Iommi would agree with you. I think he said as much in his solo album. But this one, it sounds like they were trying to write a Black Sabbath album and succeeded. It very much sounds like something that would fit in with the Dio era. But usually, I think the biggest discourse around these albums comes along with the vocalists. So compared to Ozzy and Dio, what do you think of Tony Martin's vocals?
He sounds more like Dio to me than Ozzy. Like more, I don't know, operatic, more technical. I think he does a good job with the songs as they are. I think he has that aggressive growl going to it while also still being able to hit those high notes. Really sells like the subject matter, which I think is cool. Kind of like that folk horror aesthetic. That feels like like the songs could be about like a movie like Witchfinder General or something like that, Yeah,
it does kind of invoke like their early days when they were just trying to make like an album that scares people. And I think the biggest criticism I've heard, and I think one that comes from Iommi himself, is he relied a little bit too much on like the devil and that kind of stuff. But I think it's got a good spooky atmosphere, like as a listener.
Yeah, I like songs about the devil.
Well, songs about the devil are cool.
Yeah, because Satan is awesome. This podcast endorses Satan.
Speaking of which, but while we're listening to this, I'm skimming through Iommi's autobiography, and I guess during this tour, they were going to tour Mexico, and they actually got kicked out of the country before they could play. And I guess the Catholic Church like arranged for that to happen. And Iommi was saying like people showed up with like machine guns and forced him out. It's crazy.
I actually believe that. Yeah.
Oh, I do too. Yeah. I mean, I think Sabbath got shut down here in the United States a bunch of times in similar fashions. So.
You know what I think is funny about that is I've always saw Sabbath as kind of like a, okay, hear me out. And part of this idea isn't wholly my own, but I can't really cite a comment on a message board that I read years ago. I can't remember who to cite for it. But like, I consider Sabbath to be kind of a Christian band in the way that like The Exorcist is a Christian movie where it's beware the devil, he is crafty and will draw you into his seductive yet dangerous power.
All the guys in Sabbath would consider themselves Christian, I think. And Geezer Butler, I read his autobiography recently, and I think he would agree with you that Sabbath is more of a beware of the devil type thing than an endorsement of it. Ozzy would certainly agree with that statement as well. And I think even the front man from Stryper, the Christian metal band, cited After Forever as like one of the first like Christian metal songs, and it's hard to disagree with him.
Yeah, so I think that's why I think it's kind of funny that they've always developed that controversy, because they're not like, well, Slayer has a Catholic in it too. Like Slayer is also doing that same kind of thing, but they're not like endorsing evil. They're just they're having fun in an aesthetic space that invokes like Christian ideas of evil.
Yeah. Well, so that was side A. Oh, another thing we want to talk about, When Death Calls featured a solo from Brian May. I guess he was just kind of in the studio, and I was like, you want to play it? And he's like, oh, can I? And so he did the solo. And did you pick it out when you were listening to it?
I could tell it wasn't Iommi. It didn't sound like Iommi. It fit the song really well. It was really cool. It didn't necessarily sound like the kind of thing I associate with Brian May, but it was a really good, cool solo, and it sounds like May probably just had a lot of fun doing it.
Oh yeah, yeah, and those two are like really good friends, and I hope they do an album together sometime before one of them dies. Cause
I hope so too. Yeah, they came kind of out of the same scene.
yeah, well, and they're talking about doing the box set that's coming out, and he was gonna have Tony Martin come down and maybe do like a couple of songs, but I guess they have an agreement that no songs besides the original lineup can be released after they got together. So at this point they can't. But it's like I'd love for there to be like maybe like an Iommi, Martin, May project with those three together. That'd be amazing, I think.
Yeah, maybe bring in that keyboard player too. And
he's passed away.
Oh, never mind. The rhythm section on this was really good.
It's Laurence Cottle on bass, and he's not like a name. Like he's just kind of a jazz session player. And Iommi was even commenting like he doesn't look the part like at all. He looks just like a jazz guy. And he was in the video. And maybe before we do the final stuff, I'll show you the video. I was thinking when he was playing, he sounded a lot like Geezer Butler. Like he kind of got that vibe down, fills and that kind of stuff. And then the drummer is Cozy Powell, who was on Rainbow with Dio, so there's a connection there as well.
Nice. Well, a good session bass player can like listen to the old albums and be like, okay, yeah, I can do something like this, and kind of add the flourishes that really make it fit.
Yeah,
so yeah,
it sounds like he did his homework when he did this, and he comes up later in like Sabbath lore on Tony Iommi's first solo album that he was able to release under his name, where he plays with Tony and Ozzy and Bill on a track. So it's like kind of Black Sabbath, because all of those people were in Black Sabbath, but it's just minus Geezer because they were fighting at the time. But I think that's all I got to say about side A. Are you ready to move on to side B?
Yes. There's also probably some ideas that I want to hold off for till I've listened to the whole thing before I comment.
Yeah,
so
same.
Put a pin in that.
All right.
Why'd you leave your kids out on the table? It's the B-52's version. That
worked way too well.
It did.
Okay, and we're back from side B. David, what did you think of side B?
As a whole, I thought it was a weaker side than side one, although it wasn't bad. Like, this isn't an album that I would say like really drops off on side two like a lot of albums. I thought the first two tracks on it started off sounding too much like commercial 80s metal, not quite Hair, but getting pretty close to Hair. Sounding more territory. Sounding more LA than Britain.
Yeah, not typically a sound that I enjoy. Like there's some bands that do it well, but yeah, like I'm guessing you don't care for it as much.
No, yeah, that's not my thing. I'm a little allergic to that sound. Although, like, these songs weren't bad. They didn't get quite into that territory, but they sounded in the neighborhood of them until like the second half of each song got much better. Like, it got spookier and cool, and I liked that. But then Black Moon, the second to the last song, side 2, track 3 of 4, was my favorite song on the whole album for some reason. It's like, I have this really cool blues riff to it.
Yeah, it kind of had a vibe that I would say is more similar to the classic Sabbath era. It's got kind of a blues shuffle, but you mentioned you thought it sounded a bit more like Zeppelin than Sabbath, and I can see that.
Yeah.
I could see like Ozzy singing that song.
I could too, yeah. And then I liked the album closer. I thought that was a good album closer. I liked that it was about Dick Grayson, just like Judas Priest did a song about Kurt Wagner. Favorite, like the all-time great 80s superheroes.
Yeah, that song I thought was really cool because it had a lot of really dynamic moments and a lot of different changing parts, which I think works really well for a song closer.
I've always wanted to open a beer on mic. The previous podcast I was on was for work, so I couldn't. I suppose I could have gotten like a soda or an iced tea and opened it on mic and never did, but I've always just wanted to open a beer on mic.
But you would have known it wasn't a beer, so artistically it needed to be a beer.
Yes. But yeah, as a whole, I liked it. Like I've never really listened to this era of Sabbath. I think it was interesting that they were on an indie label, which I guess that would put them like in the same scene as, I don't know, like who are the more indie metal bands of that era, like the Melvins, which doesn't sound like the Melvins, doesn't sound like Butthole Surfers, doesn't sound like but
which is funny because like their early era, I could kind of peg with the Melvins. But yeah, I don't see this one kind of sounding like the grunge bands of the era, even though they influenced those bands.
Yeah. But yeah, as a whole, it was a really good album.
Do you think, because the biggest discourse that I hear among the Tony Martin albums is they're just not as good as the classic Ozzy or Dio era albums. Do you agree with that assessment?
I mean, they're okay. I don't think they're as good as a lot of the classic ones, but nothing's going to be the classic ones, and they do their own thing pretty well, even if they harken back a lot to the earlier ones. It does sound kind of like, it sounds like, even though it's only one of the same members, it sounds like it fits in with like the kind of like a cross between the Ozzy and Dio eras.
I was saying when we were listening, it's almost like they Cronenberg together the Ozzy and Dio era.
Yes,
because Tony Martin reminds me a lot of Dio, although he's a lot more restrained. Because Dio kind of goes into an aggressive, growly territory sometimes, and then Ozzy's kind of got his more depressed style that Tony Martin doesn't really do. There is a live album where he sings Ozzy songs that I might show you sometime in the future, but
yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah. But yeah, overall, like, I'm a Sabbath obsessed fan. So when I got done with the Ozzy and Dio eras and I was looking for stuff to buy, and that was back before anybody cared about these albums, so I was able to get them off eBay for like $5. And now I think they're in like the $30 and $40 territory for even like a beat up used copy, but although the box set's going to be out soon, so that'll change that. But I picked it up, and I thought this album and the TYR, which we're going to visit probably in a week or two, I thought they fit in very well with the Sabbath lineup, probably even better than the two that came before it, which I'd say is more of a Tony Iommi solo project. Like this one, it sounds like he's like, all right, what made Sabbath, and they tried to go more for that. There's a little bit of what, not quite hair metal, but I kind of liked it. I never really thought about it before until we were listening to it today, but I've kind of felt like the more poppy moments worked pretty well when it was contrasting with like the creepiness, the creepy like Sabbath vibe. Like it's almost like they tricked you into listening to a more commercial song, and then they hit you with this like nasty Sabbath style riff.
Yeah, I really liked it. Like I was ready to be disappointed by those songs after hearing like the first half, and then it switched from something that you would hear in an exercise montage in an 80s movie to like something actually really cool, and the build-up made it work, and it made me retroactively like this stuff that I'd previously been a little cold on.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it worked in the end. It was just as a whole, I didn't like side 2 as much as side 1, but that's kind of true of most records.
Yeah.
There's a small handful of records where I like side 2 better. Maybe we'll get to one eventually.
Side 1 was very strong, and side 2 wasn't quite as strong, but the closer and the one before that were both very, very strong. So the album as a whole, say, maybe can't hang with Master of Reality, but I think is still worth seeking out if you're a Sabbath fan.
Yeah. Or if you just want, if you want to hear some good 80s metal that isn't hair shit, I think this is you really can do much worse than this. Like I think as a whole it was a good album. Like it doesn't hit like that classic first 5 or like even the early Dio stuff level of just like iconicness, but it's solid music. Rhythm section's great. The addition of the keyboards as like an official member of the band, not something that Ozzy or Tony just kind of throw in if they feel it fits in. Just it was really good. It was well integrated.
I will mention real quick though, they did do Jeff Nichols a little dirty because they wouldn't let him be up front on stage for some reason until like he might have been on this tour, but like on previous tours they hid him for some reason. And that's a common practice with metal bands and keyboard players for some reason. But
I was kind of annoyed that he didn't show up at all in the music video. Honestly,
yeah. And then well, first we'll talk about the bonus track, and then we'll come back around to the music video. But the bonus track, I'm gonna air a slight grievance. I'm kind of annoyed that on the box set it's not gonna be on the vinyl version, but just the CD version, because each of them is gonna have a bonus track on the CD version, and on the vinyl version it won't have those bonus tracks. And I guess maybe there's a space concern, but I'm kind of annoyed they didn't put them on a separate record or something like that, so the vinyl people can get them. But
yeah, throw in a bonus 45 or just adjust the play speed so that you can fit it on. Or yeah,
because I would have loved to have those on vinyl, because I thought Cloak and Dagger was a really good track. What did you think of it?
Cloak and Dagger was like probably my third favorite track out of the whole thing, so I really wish they'd found a way to keep it on. Maybe
I would have replaced the two songs that opened side B with that song. Like either of those, I think I could have replaced them with, even though I think they're good songs. But if I was in charge at the time, I probably would have maybe even opened side B with that song.
It was just a really cool song. It's the one that, like, it all felt quite a bit like classic Sabbath to me, but it's the one that felt the most like it. So maybe they found it wasn't, like the most original. I don't know why they didn't include it. I'm speculating wildly. It was a really good song.
And he didn't talk about it in his autobiography. You wonder what goes through their heads at the time, because I've heard so many like B-sides that are just like, why wasn't that on the album?
Yeah, I've heard some songs where it's like some bonus tracks or some B-sides or some unreleased song from an aborted recording session, all that, or like some of the best thing the band has ever done, and then the band never mentions it. Like they consider it like, whatever. Like my example of it would be, of this from another band, would be All Play Rebel by Killing Joke, which was in like some abandoned sessions for the songs that they would later do on Nighttime. But it's like that was one of the many that from the Kid Jansen, or I think whatever they call it, sessions that just didn't make. And it was like, why? This is one of the best songs you ever did. Why didn't this ever get released on anything? What's going on?
Yeah, I remember you showing me that one, and it's like, you kind of wonder why they didn't dig it up later even. But
yeah, I guess sometimes though, like when you're in the moment, you're not approaching it like an audience, and so those things don't always click.
Yeah, maybe they just didn't click with Cloak and Dagger, so they're just like a bonus track, or maybe it was just a record company thing. Because I get the impression that Iommi just looks at this stuff like a product to be sold. Like once it gets to the record label, like not that he's not proud of his songs, but it sounds like once they go to the record label, he's just like, all right, that's their problem. They're like, here's the songs, you get them out there.
I did my end, you do yours.
Yeah, exactly. So he probably didn't even have any say on whether that was on the album or not, but I'm just speculating.
Yeah.
But.
Well, and then by now, I'm sure, by the time he wrote his autobiography, he's written so many songs, he's not going to remember all of them.
Yeah. Well, with how much coke he was probably on in this period, I doubt he remembers much of anything.
Yeah, true.
I'm kind of surprised. I'll bet you had some people around. They was just like, hey, you were around for the Headless Cross tour. Can you give me some refreshers?
What did I play on this one?
Now, I showed you the music video for Headless Cross, and that also featured the remastered version that's going to be coming out. And I did notice some more tightness on the bass end, especially on the keyboards. Sounds like the sound's going to be a little better than the original mix. And the video, I guess they played at a place called Battle Abbey near Hastings in Sussex. And that's where William the Conqueror defeated King Harold at the Battle of Hastings.
That's something Sabbath would do. Yep.
So yeah, that's where they did that video, and that was a very cool setting for a music video, I thought.
Yeah, it evoked the same mood as the cover. Just wish they'd had the keyboard player on screen.
I thought it was funny because Iommi mentioned Laurence Cottle, the session bass player, didn't look anything like a metal guy. Like he was just like a standard jazz guy, and we're watching the videos, and it's just like he just puts on black clothes.
Yeah, he looked like, I don't know, the camera didn't stay on him long enough to get a clear view, but it looked like an office temp wearing a black shirt with his black work pants, basically.
Yeah, they didn't focus on him at all, so it's like they knew. Well, so that was the Headless Cross. We're going to do an album from Dave next time. And then after that, we're going to talk about TYR, which I think all the things that you liked about this album, I think, are ramped up on that next one. So
nice.
You can look forward to that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Oh, and next episode, I'm going to be bringing a double album. So I don't know how we're going to break. We'll discuss that next time. But I am going to be bringing the name of this band as Talking Heads because we're already doing a live art rock double album. So looking forward to that.
Just hitting him with it right away.
Yeah, just start with that.
Yeah, at some point I'll have to do Hawkwind Search in Space just as an answer to that.
Oh, I have a Hawkwind one that I'm going to bring in later too.
Oh,
but yeah, we're going to have fun.
Exactly. All right, well, we don't have a guest today, so I guess we'll just plug our own shit. We're both in projects called The Illiterates and Lucid Fugue. The theme song is from our first Lucid Fugue EP called Non-Euclidean Pornography. We got an EP out for The Illiterates that you can find on various places. Dave was in a band called Gong Farmer. I was in a band called Megaton. And you can find all my stuff on Kill Rock Music SWS on most social medias, or killrockmusic.com. That's KILRAVOC. And Dave, do you got any socials you want to plug?
Yeah. The Illiterates and Lucid Fugue stuff is all on your channel too.
Oh yeah. So, yeah. If you go to my website, that's all in there too.
Yeah. So I guess you could, like, if you really want to find Gong Farmer's Bandcamp, you totally can. That's GONGFERMOUR. And I think it's just like, yeah, gongfarmer.bandcamp.com.
There's some good shit on there.
There is, yeah. It's like a spooky post-punk goth type thing. It started as more of like a like nervy Devo type thing, and then I think we just got more depressed as we kept going. But yeah, and there's that, and then
it is kind of a precursor to our current project in a lot of ways. I mean, we were all in Gong Farmer before we formed the Illiterates, so
yeah. But yeah, I think that's all I have to plug. I'm sure I will have more to plug as I start moving into my content production phase. Oh, if you want to hear me in a more professional podcast setting, since I referenced this podcast earlier, check out some of the old episodes of Omaha Public Library's podcast, The Book Drop. Especially check out episode 97, Book Sound Tracking. That was the one where I am the most like this on. There's an episode coming out soon that is the last one before a format change. I hadn't been on it in a while at that point, but I come on right before the format change to do kind of a farewell episode, so you can also listen to that. I think that's all.
All right, well, go listen to Black Sabbath, everybody, and have a good day.
Yeah.